Tears of the Kingdom is good, kind of? Given how ubiquitous it is right now, I won't tread over what you've probably already heard for too long, but there's a lot to love about this game, and I want you to keep in mind that I know that before I take a very long dump on it. Here's a brief moment of positivity. The fuse system really makes weapon durability a lot more tolerable, because even though your weapons still break all the time, you're not afraid to go into combat. Monster parts didn't do anything before, but now you can actually harvest useful resources that are basically guaranteed to give you more attack power than whatever you lost obtaining them. So yeah, this is going to help a lot of people come to terms with the system. Really good compromise between the complaints that people had and the core gameplay of Breath of the Wild. More enemy variety than the first game. These cave troll things scared the shit out of me when I first saw them. Ultra Hand, which basically makes Zelda a really polished Gmod. I didn't know that was possible. Seriously impressive, almost zero jank. Good job. It's just better at a cursory glance, but I didn't enjoy it. Really, the number one thing I felt while playing the game was frustration. I should love this game. It just takes a game that I love, adds some new content, refines the mechanics. I have no problem with an asset flip. That's what Majora's Mask did. So, it didn't make sense to me at first, how much I was not enjoying it. You've probably seen a million Breath of the Wild video essays. The heart of Breath of the Wild is, you guessed it, exploration and atmosphere. Not just an open world, but open gameplay, open engagement with it. You are not really here to complete a set of directives. The experience it gave me and so many other people just in its immersion made up for so many other things you could criticize. Like the underwhelming dungeons, story, the weapon durability. This stuff is contentious, and basically nobody thinks it's perfect, but if this game worked for you, that didn't really matter as much as it probably should have. Everything was so novel and fun to discover that it was like an experiential override. And the main thing they really had to do was find a way to make a world which we've already run over with a fine tooth intriguing again. To do that, it had to not just improve the mechanics, as it did, but make the familiar compelling. I'm not asking them to make the old totally new. I'm asking for a reason to want to explore this map, which I've explored before. In Breath of the Wild, my reason for exploring was how novel and beautiful everything was. The brief arpeggios over the sound of Link's shoes on the grass. The way I swelled with fear every time I grazed the edges of Guardian territory and rode far, far away. That there was just so much for you to experience. Looking at something in the distance and thinking, what the hell is that? And going on foot to find it. I would get distracted by interesting things on my way to uncover interesting things in like an exploratory spiral. This was enough. What is my reason now? It's so easy to just fly everywhere from quest to quest with the game's new verticality that there's no reason for me to dig deep or like engage in that spiral. Plus, I've played in this world before, so you have to give me some really, really cool stuff in new areas that makes me want to go beyond Puddle Deep, or make the same places intrigue me in a different sense somehow. To me, the most obvious tool in this case is actually narrative. I know that's probably not the main thing you associate with this era of Zelda, just give me a second. Breath of the Wild told its story through collectible memory cutscenes that you could find by going to places depicted on your Sheikah slate. This wasn't great, but I don't think it ruined the game, because the game didn't feel like it was meant to be any sort of like substantial or linear narrative experience. Breath of the Wild is about solitude, the passage of time, everything in its narrative and environmental storytelling, and the things it encourages you to do gameplay-wise, everything fits into this premise. So it's kind of okay that the story is the way that it is. Sparse environmental storytelling and narrative is simply not enough anymore, in my opinion. A game where you're supposedly rebuilding a broken kingdom, people are everywhere, and there is more of a present narrative cannot rely on the same story delivery that a game about digging around in the ruins of a 100-year-old kingdom can. With Breath of the Wild, I didn't need a narrative within the game to enjoy it in like a sort of narrative way. It did not set up that expectation in me. The narrative of my experience playing the game was enough narrative for me. Not the story of the game or role-playing, but like the story of the player playing the game. Even years after playing this game, I can still recall minutia of my experience that I can't even remember with other games that I played a few months ago. I was able to fully focus in on taking advantage of the freedom the game gave me because the whole game was designed with that in mind, from the story, which confines characters to the past and to divine beasts, to the way the map is designed where you can see landmarks from really far away, and the only way to get there is basically by foot or by horse through a bunch of other really interesting stuff you are going to encounter. But Tears of the Kingdom does not have such a strong commitment to open-endedness, or anything for that matter. And not doing the same thing is okay. If the game wants to take another direction, I want it to, because of its new premise and the new relationship a lot of players have with it, having played the first one. I wanted it to do something different that suited it. But Tears of the Kingdom doesn't do that. It's not dedicated to the full player freedom, no real directives vibe anymore, but instead of committing to something else, it's deeply aimless. Breath of the Wild had the aim of aimlessness so you could like construct your own aim whole cloth. Tears of the Kingdom feels aimless by mistake. The champions aren't ghosts anymore. There's Lookout Landing as a home base. There's more NPCs. They're here. Everything is here. This game should be about rebuilding Hyrule. That's just the sense you get with how they set it up, but it refuses to step beyond what Breath of the Wild did and ends up being an inferior version of the same experience as a result. It has one foot in Breath of the Wild world and one foot in the future, and what the game has the potential to be on its own. I had a lot of fun for like 50 hours, just messing around with the machines, barely exploring and not actually doing any of the quests that the game wanted me to do. A lot of people started out that way in this game. The hype was at its peak with Alter Hand. But then I started looking for some more substantial content. I did the Rito dungeon, and that was fun, my favorite in the game with that, like platforming lead-up thing, but it didn't quite scratch the itch that I wanted it to scratch because it was so similar to Breath of the Wild. We'll get to that later. So I went other places, and I started looking in an incredibly obvious place to look for it. Hateno. This was a moment that kickstarted a series of disappointments for me. It was just a snowball of frustrations. They just capitalized so little on really obvious opportunities that narrative continuity could give them. This is a small moment, but I think it's a good one to share to illustrate what I mean. I expected a lot of really interesting story content in Hateno. I wanted the feeling of going back and seeing it was lived in. I wanted it to compel me in a different way with the same place. Tap into both my nostalgia and the fact that in the narrative, you supposedly have been here before. In Breath of the Wild, it was empty, but now this place is lived in. When I went into my house, I found Zelda's journal and her diary in the well, where she talks about how they helped rebuild Hyrule, and Link follows her everywhere, and, you know, they teach at the local school. Adorable. But nobody in Hateno greets you like they know you. The kids mention Zelda, but don't know who the hell you are. Brother, I lived here before her, and then we cohabitated for 5 years. Instead, they focus on making it as friendly to new players as is possible, and without a smidge of faith in their ability to put A and B together. This is not a complicated thing to deal with expositionally. I don't think that continuity is going to isolate new players. The context is so simple, you explained it in a diary entry. This isn't just making the world friendly for new players. This is sabotage on their behalf when it's not really necessary. Hell, if you're really worried about it, detect switch save files, modify the dialogue depending on whether or not you played Breath of the Wild. That wouldn't solve even close to all of the issues I have, but at least it would be like a band-aid on the problem. They didn't even they didn't even slap a band-aid on it. They just let that shit bleed out. I understand that having Link be anything but an empty husk is blasphemy, but I just think that they can dip their toes in the water a bit. It feels so unnatural otherwise. You don't have to make him talk, but you can have the NPCs acknowledge his existence outside of being a vessel of Gundam building more often than they currently do. And they set it up with that diary. My relationship with Hateno in this game is treated as if it is the exact same as my relationship with it was in the first, even though it makes no sense that it would be that way. I made a beeline for it the moment I wanted interesting stuff, but it was just reskinned and filled with nothing quests, feeding kids curry, giving people mushrooms. I had so many ideas on my way to Hateno about what might be happening there. Am I gonna have to use Ultra Hand to help the people in some way? Are there going to be main quest relevant and emotionally compelling moments around the sort of life they built together here and how they settled in the community? This stuff is gestured at, but it's like a passing glance at what feels like it should be the central emotional beat of this location. And if the main thing happening in Hyrule right now is rebuilding after the calamity and the upheaval, and the game gives you abilities around engineering and building, why don't you have places like this have quests that also lend themselves to Ultra Hand? It's just a really, really good ability in a world that does not own up to the task of accommodating it at all. There's a side quest in Lurinen Village about rebuilding. I thought I finally found what I was looking for when I encountered it, but the bulk of the quest comes down to moving logs from location A to B with absolutely no puzzle element. It's just like log and hole, log and hole, log and hole. There's a part where you have to transport the logs to the village, and I thought that was fun, but it was literally the one time that I feel like this happened, and then the rest of the quest was nothing. Why are all of the engineering challenges, with very few exceptions, siphoned off into a million shrines instead of being creatively integrated? I have no idea. It's just not thoughtfully built to accommodate the new abilities. It's like there's two games happening. The game where you're in shrines or in camps in the fucking mini game, the Ultra Hand mini game, or the game that's happening in the main locations of the game, which feels totally disconnected gameplay-wise and emotionally. Give me actual puzzles and not in the shrines in the actual game world. No, attaching two pieces of wood together to hold up an advertisement 40 fucking times over does not count as an engineering puzzle. But I'm nitpicking. My expectations are too high. Who cares about Hateno? There's so much new area. Your map has been tripled. This whole new aspect of traversal, this new verticality has been added to the game. What about that? When you start off, the Sky Island you're on is big and beautiful, and it is the only Sky Island in the game that even remotely feels like this. The rest of them are New York apartment levels of size and intrigue. It's just a bunch of shrines that you need to access by transporting a rock. That is what you have to do every single time. There are no characters. There are no real quests. It's just a bunch of pretty floating rocks. The intro really makes you think that the sky is gonna be way cooler than it actually ends up being. Everybody I was talking to playing the game thought it was gonna have so much more than it ended up having. I think that through its marketing and its tutorial section, it sets up the expectation that this area is going to have, even the bulk of the game, or a substantial portion of the main content. But it's just a playground. And it was really disappointing. But then I found another area, and I was like, oh, maybe down here. You go into the depths, and those sinister horns kick in. And you think, I'm about to find some fuck shit down here. But even though the depths are huge, just as big as the surface world. They might as well be a tenth of their size with the amount of content there is. Although it's fun to mine Zonite and fight enemies, the easy resource of Sundelions and the light roots everywhere make the no healing challenge largely obsolete, so you might as well just fight enemies in the overworld, honestly. Especially since there is almost no content down here, just like the sky, beyond enemies you can fight. And when you do fight enemies on the overworld, you're not gonna get a scratch either. The bow is so ridiculously overpowered, the way to defeat every enemy in the game is almost identical. You just have to headshot and wail on it. This was the case in Breath of the Wild, I'll admit, but I think it's even worse now. Because of the new, bomb fruit, dazzle fruit, fuse it to your arrow, just a million ways for you to cheese. I don't know why they also did this with the new enemies they added too. It is just laughably easy. You can cheese any game, but this game, begs you to cheese it. It gives, 50,000 methods to cheese the game. People always talk about making your own fun, but I could spend 30 minutes making a complicated contraption to destroy these bokos, or I could spend literally 30 seconds headshotting and wailing on them. I don't think it's on the player to choose the most difficult option when the difference is that extreme. You need to actively challenge me. Okay, fine, the new areas are not that interesting, but surely they did something new with the map that they already had, the part of the map that has characters on it, unlike the other half of the world. Okay, maybe Hateno is kind of disappointing, but maybe there's new towns and stuff to really fill up the world. Right? Right? So you know how in Breath of the Wild, because the game was structured to be like a really open-ended exploratory experience, as we've previously discussed, you were basically just given 4 quests to help the different races by going there, completing some side quests, doing a dungeon, and then getting a power from somebody there. And you didn't really do much else with the champions, because the champions are spirits restricted to their divine beasts, and the story was so detached from everything that it didn't super matter. It was a game about exploring nature, so the settlements were never really the main draw. But this time, the champions are alive, Hyrule is actively rebuilding, and this is supposedly a different game. Get ready to do the same exact thing that you did in Breath of the Wild. I think this is lazy. I don't have any other way to put it. I like the quests here in a vacuum more than I like them in Breath of the Wild. The dungeons are no longer aesthetically identical. The build-up to the Rito dungeon was pretty awesome, although doing it first really set me up for disappointment with the rest of the regions. But the dungeons are short, and they're built to be so open that it just kind of feels like you're hopping around completing random puzzles in a box until Nintendo lets you out. They feel like a chore, especially since the abilities you get from them are not helpful at all, except the Rito one, which was also kind of the case in the first game, but not nearly as bad. Having the spirits of the champions in battles instead of the actual champions is a cop-out, too. They're literally alive. Why can't I just take them with me? This is goofy. My theory is that at first, they had it so that the champions actually came with you, but the champions function so poorly in battle, they have spirits come instead, so that you can dismiss them at any time. Which, trust me, you will. Sidon, dude, come here. I need your help. Why are you all the way over there? Oh, I think I need to use Riju's new lightning ability. Get out of the way, but... This is the jankiest part of the gameplay to me, and it's the reward for completing the main quests. And there isn't even any story satisfaction to completing the quests either, because the cutscenes are, I kid you not, identical. It is the same script, the same animations, the same flashbacks for different characters. When I got to the second dungeon, and I just watched the same thing I had already watched a second time with a different character, I was actually shocked by the nerve to do this. Honestly, the champions might as well be dead ghosts talking to you as they were before, with how gratifying it is to engage with them and gain their abilities. The only one that was fun for me to do was the final one, and even that wasn't great. It was just refreshing after doing this 4 times in a row. Just the story happening in the present because of all the stuff with the champions not coming with you and their quests being the same as Breath of the Wild and not that deep. It just feels juvenile and completely unserious despite the weight of the situation you are supposedly in. And the actual story is happening in the past again. How is that going? So you know how in the initial trailers for the game, Zelda cuts her hair, which in Japanese culture for women is representative of basically the end of an era in someone's life, and everyone was speculating, is she finally gonna get out of her damsel role, play a more active role in the game, maybe she's gonna be a sidekick, maybe even playable, maybe they're gonna do something cool with Zelda in Zelda. Yeah, they did the same thing that they did in the first game, but it was cooler this time, at least. Mostly in concept. In execution, it was kind of whatever. Alright, here's a quick recap. Long story short, in the beginning of the game, when Link and Zelda find dehydrated Ganondorf under Hyrule Castle, a big altercation occurs. Zelda falls down a hole and gets sent into the past to the first king and queen of Hyrule. In this past, she helps them steal Ganon away. Then Link, in the present, sends Zelda the broken Master Sword into the past. And Zelda realizes that the sword is the only way to defeat Ganondorf, and she has to heal it for future Link. But the only way to heal it is to bathe it in sacred light for a long period of time, for thousands of years. So she resolves herself to turn into an actual dragon and sacrifice her own sanity and mind and self and just be an immortal sacred dragon with the Master Sword embedded within her so that Link might in the future recover the rematerialized Master Sword from her head and defeat Ganon once and for all. Now, I think Zelda's sacrifice is the coolest part of these cutscenes. My jaw dropped when I realized that she had sacrificed her actual sanity. Like, there is a real horror to this. You can just go to Dragon Zelda at any time and look into her crazed dragon eyes, and it's really sad. Even though Zelda does not play an active role in the game you are playing, she has a really important role in the story. Zelda is cooler than, anyone else in the game. I think it was an awesome way to elevate her from just being a damsel, but I feel like the horror of this decision isn't really explored well enough in dialogue or anything like that to redeem the fact that, yeah, everything happens in the past, you collect it randomly and you don't interact with it. And then at the end of the game, you save her. And it's legitimately emotional. This is one of the coolest shots in a game that I've seen in a while. I love how reaching out for her as she's falling is the first and last thing that happens. Good wrap up. There are things to like about this. It's just so detached from what you're actually doing. I would be more okay if they did something really interesting with it, but for all the promise of intrigue in this, conceptually, it's still puddle deep because, yeah, Nintendo. And speaking of puddle deep, Ganondorf is a cartoonishly evil villain. They don't even give him a personality or motivation. In Breath of the Wild, this was fine. I thought it was awesome that evil was not a character, it was a entity enveloping the castle, stopping time, rotting everything around it. There is something horrific about that. It fits the game. I don't mind. But when you give that a body and a voice, it's just corny. And the dialogue is pretty poorly written. The voice acting in English is still really, really bad. Zelda always sounds like she's on the verge of crying or passing out still, and I don't know why. This game looks so cool. It's cool in concept. I think that even with all of these problems, Zelda as a character in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom is the most interesting one that we've had. It's just that it falls flat. And it doesn't make sense thematically for this game to have such a detached plot. I know I've said that a million times, but I'm bugged, okay? This is the spiraling section. I have a bunch of miscellaneous complaints, might as well if I'm already submitting one. I was so annoyed by all of the stuff that I just talked about that things I was charitable about in Breath of the Wild started to get on my nerves. Yeah, I'm just gonna ramble and trail off about a list of minuscule complaints. Why can I still eat mid-battle? Like, at any point, and the only thing standing between me and infinite health is like 2 minutes of cooking tedium? Why is it that even though there's so many recipes, they basically only exist for role-playing purposes because some of the most difficult and expensive things to cook in the game are the least useful? Like, you can go to shops and buy butter and oil and all this stuff and recover 5 hearts? Why should I be doing this? Link's diet variety? Why is it that I have to go through literally the same dialogue with the Bolsenstein guy and I can't skip it? Every time I talk to the stable guy for different things, I have to wait for him to saunter over to different spots at the desk. Why are they adding tedium to this game that feels like it's for the sake of realism, but this wouldn't happen in real life? Why are there 3 counters at a small roadside inn, all operated by one person? This is a uniquely bad customer service experience. Horses are useless and exactly the same as the first game. Even worse because there's so many other ways to traverse and they did nothing to compensate. There's literally armor in the Breath of the Wild DLC that lets you do this. By this, I meant call your horse from anywhere. But they don't let you use it in this game, even though you can transfer your horses. And the special horses with quests dedicated to them aren't customizable, they can't pull. Why would you make the special horses less useful than the ones I can catch in every field in the game? Parts in my inventory. I have to manually go into my inventory first, drop those parts on the floor, and then go to auto build, instead of auto build just automatically taking the parts out of my inventory. And every time I forgot to take things out first, because it would make more sense for the game to take things out for you, but it doesn't do that. So I'd have to close auto build and then go into my inventory, then drop the things, then go back to auto build. This happened so many times, my brain was just streamlining what should have been streamlined. I really like the idea of having the old maps leading to armor, but I also wish I knew what I was hunting for. This might be something a lot of people could reasonably disagree with me about, but the depths are pretty boring for me and time-consuming to traverse. And then you finally get there and it's like a rabbit hat that lets you side climb faster. So I ended up having like 1 piece of armor from each set and I couldn't make Link hot without spending like 100 hours. I don't want this game to not be an open world. I'm not one of those. I want the old Zelda. Actually, Breath of the Wild was the first Zelda game I played, so that's not my attitude about it. And I don't want this game to become like a Disco Elysium level narrative experience. I understand it's a Nintendo game. It's not gonna explore anything too complicated. I just want the game to do what it indicates to me it is going to do, or what feels really obvious for it to do. If Link is in a place he's been before, I want there to be side quests that take advantage of the obvious emotional potential there, or at least for more NPCs to acknowledge you've been there, so that my relationship with these places, having been there before, is reflected in the game. There's all these new abilities Link has, but the game doesn't give you enough reasons to actually use them. I feel like you could beat this game with a bow, a stick, rocks, fast travel, and a paraglider. You're never gonna use things in combat beyond the fuse mechanic and your own shenanigans for Twitter clips. I don't have any sort of compelling emotional or aesthetic experience to like distract me from the problems with the game. Breath of the Wild was so enjoyable in that sense for so many hours that even though there were issues, because it was a game that was dedicated to exploration and did that very well, it just followed through on what I expected and it was alright. Where does this game follow through? Where does it promise me something and then actually deliver it to me? Not that often. Here's what I think they need to do. Hire a narrative designer. If you don't know what narrative design is, let me explain it to you real quick. It's kind of a flexible position, but it basically lies between writer and game designer, marrying those two things together. Zelda does not have dedicated writers or narrative designers as far as I can find, and that probably doesn't surprise you, because Nintendo moment. There's artists, there's designers, I think they're doing a great job. But they lost the plot a bit. Or maybe this isn't even necessary. I almost suspect that the problem here, and by the way, this is really just suspicion, this is wild speculation. I suspect that the problem here isn't that they don't have a narrative designer, it's that there is someone actively blocking more thoughtful narrative design. There's so much creativity in the visual and aesthetic identity of this game. There's a lot of cohesion and design. This shit looks so cool. It almost feels like this team could maybe just keep doing things the way that they are without a dedicated narrative designer if they were allowed to. Because the attention to detail in so many aspects of this game that are sort of hidden under the surface make me feel like the average artist working on the game has a lot more passion about Zelda as a world and about like the story of Zelda than what is demonstrated in this game at the surface. But the development was so overwhelmed by the magnitude of Ultra Hand as a mechanic that I feel like other really important aspects were obstructed. I was disappointed. I bought it on launch. I played it for 150 hours. I was so hyped. And I didn't expect it to be perfect, but I wanted it to really surprise me. Or really take advantage of the fact that they could flip these assets. And in some ways it did. I really think the Ultra Hand is great. No one's denying that. But man, why does it feel like I'm playing a Ubisoft game sometimes? Dude. Ugh. My condenser mic is not being very nice to me right now, so I'm just going to use my phone for this outro instead. Do you like video games? Maybe you don't even agree with me on this game. That's fine, we have so much in common still. I'm gonna be making some more coherent analysis of games that I actually love in the near future. If you want to hear some of my thoughts, you should subscribe here, other social media. This video is kind of a test run. Hate on me in the comments for disliking your favorite video game. Agree with me in the comments to lick my wounds.